So thanks, Grace, for the introduction. I am from the Saskatchewan SPCA as the Family Ties Coordinator. So my role is mainly focused around helping animals and humans who are experiencing a time of crisis and to help them stay together with each other. So the Saskatchewan SPCA, our mission is to coordinate and amplify a system of best practices in the animal welfare um, organizations and communities across the province. And we were established in 1928. So we've been around for quite a long time, but we work to improve animal and human welfare in a preventative approach. So we don't operate a shelter or um, enforce the Animal Protection Act. We try to help the issues that often lead to people not being able to care for their animals before that happens. So some of the programs that we do offer, we have a Striker Canine Care Fund, which offers funding for vet care from emergencies or just regular vet care for dogs that were retired from police, RCMP, or border agencies. We also offer the Saskatchewan Pet Food Bank, which partners with human food banks across the province in 19 communities. And we work with human food banks as they often have access to individuals that are experiencing food insecurity. And we find that human food insecurity goes hand in hand with pet food insecurity. We also educate the public and service providers on the violence link, which is the relationship between violence against humans and violence against animals and how they can often co-occur with each other. So we do that through the violencelink.ca, which is a website that has a whole bunch of resources for service providers and for individuals that are just wanting to learn more. We also are a part of a Working to End Violence partnership with the Provincial Association of Transition Houses and Services of Saskatchewan and Stops to Violence. So in that partnership, we developed the Saskatchewan Co-Sheltering Network and the Pet Care Kits. The network is a place for community organizations or IPV shelters, intimate partner violence shelters, to come and figure out how they can allow pets into their services or explore the idea. And along with that, we offer pet care kits, which include basic pet care items that survivors that are fleeing violence can access at no cost to them or the shelter. And that is just aimed to help alleviate some of the stress of fleeing from violence, but also having an animal with you. We have developed a horse safekeeping pilot program, which is aimed to be a grant-based program for survivors fleeing violence with a horse. So we have found that in Saskatchewan, because we have a lot of farms, our livestock population is quite high, but with horses, individuals still have that significant human-animal bond. And there's additional barriers to leaving a violent relationship with the large animals. So by providing a grant-based program, we will provide funding for boarding at a safe location for a certain amount of time until the survivor and the owner of the horse can kind of figure out their next plans. We also do work on policy and legislation recommendations. So we have done animal rescue standards to help create some guidelines and some best practices within the rescue organizations. We also work with Colleen Dell's office on pet-friendly housing. We do education, so we have an annual conference that's put on for animal welfare organizations, human service providers, vets. We have a diverse crowd that attends that. We also do a quarterly newsletter that goes out to our members And as Grace mentioned, the Emergency Animal Care Center, which is currently being built, this will provide temporary care for three main areas, and I'll get into that in the next few slides in a bit more detail. So animal welfare concerns are typically defined by the Animal Protection Act. That's the Saskatchewan Act. And it defines an animal is in distress if it is deprived food or water, care, shelter, veterinary care, or other medical attention that the animal may need. Um, if it is in need of protection from heat and cold that's extreme, that is likely to cause injuries. If it is wounded, ill, in pain, suffering, abused, or neglected, and kept in conditions that are unsanitary, that will impact the animal's health and well-being, or if the animal is abandoned by its owner, or the person responsible, that causes the animal to experience distress. Um, and that's often connected to the factors listed above here. So some of the main examples that we see with animal welfare concerns that connect with what the Act outlines is animals are left outside without the appropriate shelter. So in extreme cold, maybe a dog is left outside and it doesn't have a dog house to shelter it from wind or anything like that. With livestock, if there is a lack of shelter with sheds or straw for warmth, animals left in hot or extremely cold vehicles, grooming concerns, animals that are very matted, overcrowding or hoarding, which is often connected to the unsanitary conditions, um, lack of veterinarian care. So with that, if an animal is injured and the owner is not seeking veterinary care or is unable to, that is an animal welfare concern. And then the lack of adequate food and water would be maybe not providing the food or water, or the animal is unable to access the food or water. So in Saskatchewan, we have extremely cold winters, so livestock may not be able to access water if it's frozen and if it's not being cared for. And then animal abuse, such as like physical abuse. Animal protection services of Saskatchewan should be contacted even if individuals or the public are unsure if a situation is a welfare concern. They can typically guide you to say, yes, this is a reason to report it, or um, or not. And then they may have resources that they can offer the owner as well. A little bit more about how animal protection is kind of set up in our province. So we have Animal Protection Services of Saskatchewan and the Regina Humane Society, as well as police services across the province and RCMP can all enforce the Animal Protection Act. Regina Humane Society only enforces animal protection for the Regina area, and Animal Protection Services does the rest of Saskatchewan. So reports can be made online or by phone to Animal Protection Services of Saskatchewan or Regina Humane Society. For after-hour reports, those are typically made to police services or RCMP, who will then see if it's immediate concern that needs to be addressed or if they'll pass it to Animal Protection Services the next day. Reports typically will require the owner's name, a phone number, email address, the address of the residence, or driving instructions, the number of animals being reported, types of animals, the conditions of the animals, details regarding any concerns, and photos if the individual has those. And then the reporter's information with Animal Protection Services of Saskatchewan. You can remain confidential, so they will not disclose any of your information, but they may just require it just for some follow-ups. The Saskatchewan Emergency Animal Care Center is what we are currently building. So it will provide short-term compassionate care for owners who cannot provide the care for numerous reasons. Um, it will also offer a space to care for animals that are seized by or surrendered to law enforcement agencies or in large-scale emergencies.
This is in Saskatoon?
It is, yes. It is in Saskatoon, but it's provincial, so anybody across the province can access it. This center will not be a typical animal shelter, as in it will facilitate adoptions and it won't be open to the public. So the location will be kept fairly confidential, but it will focus on 3 areas. So the first one is safekeeping, which is providing temporary housing and care for animals whose owners are experiencing a crisis and cannot provide that care. So some examples of this might be like leaving a violent relationship or being hospitalized. The capacity for this will be 20 animals at a time. The second area will be for law enforcement, so animals seized under the Animal Protection Act by RCMP, police, and then the other agencies that enforce that. This will have the capacity for 125 cats and 70 dogs. The third area is for emergencies, so the large scale emergency housing center. If there needs to be a evacuation in a community due to a natural disaster, or any of those larger scales that displace families and often their pets as well. So the capacity for this will be 100 animals. The animal safekeeping side of it, a bit of context on why it is needed. In Saskatchewan, we have the highest rate of intimate partner violence among all the Canadian provinces. And when humans are abused, animals are at risk of experiencing a form of violence. And when animals are abused, humans are often at risk for experiencing a form of violence. So in Saskatchewan, there are typically 2 foster-based programs that offer safekeeping, but the demand for it can't the need for it can't keep up for like the demands of the programs. They can't typically take on that many animals, so that's why we kind of saw a need here for that. So when victims and survivors of intimate partner violence will stay in their abusive home longer or return when they can't take their pet with them. This can be a significant barrier as the animal's often left with the perpetrator of violence and the victim or the survivor is returning or staying out of concern for the animal's safety. And the bond that the survivor or victim may have with the animal is quite significant. It's often one of the safest non-judgmental relationships that they have in their life when they're experiencing violence. In Saskatchewan, we have had research completed that showed that 80% of survivors in Saskatchewan reported that the abuser had used at least one form of violence towards the animal, and that service providers are often aware that a survivor may not leave without a pet. Safekeeping includes a wide variety of situations that an owner may be facing beyond just the intimate partner violence. So another main focus is for hospital stays. A 2021 Michigan-based study showed that 73% of the patients in the hospital had or knew somebody who had challenges finding pet care during hospitalization. 29% said that a need for pet care had impacted their decision or of someone that they knew to be admitted to a hospital. 21% had left the hospital early due to a lack of pet care, and 91% responded yes, that they think low cost or no cost pet care programs should be offered to hospitalized patients. The safekeeping side will also work with individuals that are in situations of needing temporary care for the animals due to inpatient treatment or substance misuse treatment, mental health concerns, brief incarceration periods, and house fires, other personal crises that individuals may experience. The safekeeping side of the emergency animal care center will always have the priority of successfully reuniting people with their pets when they are able to. So this center will never take ownership of the animal. The owner that's needing the service will remain the legal owner of the animal throughout this time. And then when they are ready, they can get their animal back. There is a time frame of 60 days as of now, just to ensure that individuals are working towards a stable situation that they can care for their pets. The emergency and the law enforcement side of the center so includes those natural disasters, but also the public health crises. So people may refuse to evacuate if they cannot take their animals, and evacuation services may not be able to find places for animals for short-term care. So without a service kind of there to access, it can put owners, their animals, and the emergency responders at risk. With law enforcement, so the animals that are seized or surrendered under the Animal Protection Act will provide care for these animals for a short time, but we will not be the owners. Law enforcement will then take ownership and decide where the animal goes after that. This section aims to support law enforcement to provide efficient and effective response in larger seizes of animals when there are maybe 10 cats that need to be rehomed. It can be difficult for them to find a safe place for all those animals, as a lot of the shelters and SPCAs that do facilitate adoptions are already at full capacity. So in Saskatchewan, the animal welfare organizations can be somewhat confusing at times because we have so many and everyone kind of does similar work, but each one is separate. So for situations or concerns of rehoming or animal adoption, that would go to an SPCA, a humane society, or a rescue. If an individual is expressing that they would like to surrender their animal, it would go to one of those organizations. For animal abuse and neglect, the organizations that enforce the Animal Protection Act. For stray animals and bylaw issues would be bylaw enforcement or animal control, depending on the city and town, what they have in place there. For prevention and services to improve animal welfare, many animal welfare organizations offer some sort of support to owners and their animals. For bylaw enforcement and animal control, this would typically be concerns of roaming at large or stray animals, or at large animals that are injured, noise complaints, as well as dangerous dogs or dog bites would be RCMP, police, and other bylaw enforcement. For at-large livestock, that would be RM under the Stray Animal Act. In Saskatoon, the animal control was previously operated by Saskatoon SPCA, but that city contract has now gone to the Saskatoon Animal Control Agency. So they deal with concerns of stray or at-large animals now. For prevention and services, there are many different rescues SPCAs that offer this, but I just listed a few here. So we have New Hope Dog Rescue does offer the animal safekeeping, which is a temporary foster program for owned animals whose owners are experiencing intimate partner violence. They also offer the hospital care program for temporary foster care for anyone that is needing to be hospitalized for a short period of time and has an animal. Animal Protection Services of Saskatchewan will provide education to owners if it is an option before seizing animals. So seizing the animal is typically the last option that they go to unless it is an immediate concern. The Sask SPCA, as we've mentioned before, is education. We will do referrals to different programs such as New Hope, offer programs, and in the future, the Emergency Animal Care Center. For veterinarian services, the City of Saskatoon has a subsidized spay and neuter program. Regina Humane Society, Saskatoon Dog Rescue, the Moose Jaw Humane Society also have spay and neuter programs. The Community Vet Outreach Clinic is a pro bono vet service that is based in Saskatoon for owners who are experiencing housing insecurity or living below the poverty line. The veterinarian social worker at the Western College of Veterinary Medicine is another great veterinarian service. For pet loss support, we have the Family Pet Services in Saskatoon, which offers a pet loss support group as well as online support groups through Facebook. The Regina Humane Society also lists resources for pet loss, but does not offer a support group. So just a little recap of who to call. This is a question that we get quite a bit with animal welfare concerns, and we're always happy to answer it. But if a owner wants to surrender their animal, it would go to a SPCA, a rescue, or a humane society. For abuse and neglect, it would be the Animal Protection Services, Regina, Humane Society, Police, or RCMP. For stray animals, animal control or bylaw enforcement. Temporary care for an animal due to an owner experiencing crisis would be to the Sask SPCA or Animal Protection Services of Saskatchewan, Police, RCMP. All can refer individuals to the appropriate services and supports that they need. For wildlife, injured wildlife is referred to the Wildlife Rescue Society of Saskatchewan or the Saskatchewan Ministry of Environment. For suspected animal cruelty or abuse of wildlife would still be referred to Animal Protection Services of Saskatchewan. Okay. And there is my contact information if you have questions, and the general email for Sask SPCA. And we can typically be the hub for people to come to with questions, and then we typically try to point people in the appropriate direction. And that is all.